Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this installment of the Video Business Directory with Cynical Capital Management. Today, we have the Housedoctors, Rick and Paulina Carlberg, with us. Rick and Paulina, I met them at a local We Connect Leaders networking group in Schaumburg. Absolutely fabulous couple. Love talking to them. And again, most people go to networking events, to do business, right? And yes, that's always the fundamental reason why we attend. But the truth is, what happens is after going one or two times, you get to talk about personal things, and the personal conversations and the one-on-ones is really where I learn to where I trust people, right? And so I wanted to bring Rick and Paulina in to talk about their home inspection business. So Rick and Paulina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so why don't we get right into it? I mean, it does take some faith, right, to do something like this and be vulnerable. So thank you for that. So tell us a little bit, give us some background as to, let's go back 10, 15, 20 years. How did you guys meet? What was your inspiration that kind of brought you along this road?
Well, if we wanted to talk about when we met, that would be a long time ago, more like, I don't know,
40 years.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. We met in high school.
Yes. We met actually in high school math class. So we had the same math class. We met there. I was a senior and she was a sophomore, and I was in the remedial math class. So that's kind of how we met. And then we dated off and on for 7 years through high school and first part of college. Split up for 10 years, didn't see each other. And then she ran into my parents at a restaurant one night, and we at that point got back together. So kind of came full circle. And we both agreed that if we would have stayed together the first time, we probably wouldn't have stayed together. So it worked out well. And so yeah, that's what happened.
Wow, that's terrific. That's terrific.
Yeah.
And so what were your hobbies and interests back then? Like what led you finally to the, eventually, I mean, we'll get there later to, talk more about your business, but did you have a family that was in real estate or home inspections? Did you come from a blue collar family? Was your dad a scientist and you wanted to do something more with your hands? Like how did that take you?
Well, just to kind of speak for Rick a little bit, his dad was an incredible craftsman. I mean, he just built everything, and he just was wonderful with his hands and just knew how to do everything. We used to call him MacGyver because he could fix anything with the paper clip and a piece of gum, and he'd fix it really well to last for years. So he was an amazing man. So I'm sure that Rick kind of had that in the background. And go ahead and tell him about your.
Yeah, I kind of picked up on some of that. I was more interested in other things, I think, back then than doing construction and handiwork and so forth. But, as time went by, I actually come from a general contracting background. So I owned a company called Intex Construction in the 90s. We were a general contractor doing residential remodeling work. And it became a lot. It was, depending on other people too much. And, it became more of a babysitting job, I suppose. And then I was on a job site one day at a job in progress, and I looked across the street, and there was a person there in a truck with a home inspection signage. So I walked over and talked to him for about 20 minutes and came home and said, we're going in a different direction. So it was a really good kind of a lateral move for me, going from general contractor into inspection business. But I really, at that point, didn't want to be responsible for anyone else and just kind of wanted to go off on my own. And so I did, and that was 23 years ago, and love it and have never looked back.
Wow. And Paulina, what was your reaction when, Rick dropped the bomb saying, yeah, I'm going to do a whole new career thing? And you're like, what?
Well, it happened to be at the time also that I was 9 months pregnant, and we had just bought our first house and getting ready to move into it. So I was on board all the way because the construction business was 24/7 for him. Mm-hmm. He was gone all the time, and he didn't want to be, an away father. He wanted to be involved in everything. So he just knew that if things were going to change and he was going to be able to be part of growing a family and all that other good stuff, is he needed to be around for that. So when he told me, I was totally on board. I was thrilled.
Okay, so and did that thrill stay with you for 20 some years, because now you have to work together, right? And so maybe it's like, wow, there's a whole new dynamic when you're working with your spouse, literally, minute by minute, day by day, because my mom and dad did that, and they never left each other's side for about 50 years. So that in itself was a really interesting relationship and dynamic. And sometimes it's hard leaving business at business, and because you're bringing it at home at the same time. So how have you guys been able to handle that?
Well, first off, we're both out, at times, so we're not really together the whole time. I'm out in the field at times, and she's out in the field at times, and so we're not really in the office together 8 or 10 hours a day, every day, kind of thing. So it works out good. I mean, I know when to lead, follow, and get out of the way. And I think, we just work well together. I mean, she has her strengths and weaknesses, and as do I. And I kind of think we both know what each other's are. So I think that helps a lot.
Right.
And again, it works really well. I mean, just her taking over that part of the business and doing the environmental testing part, really, helps so much. I mean, just logistically and just being able to do it, because of if it wasn't for her, coming on board, which has been 7 years ago,
Yeah.
something like that, we wouldn't have been able to grow like we have. So it's really worked out well, really
Excellent.
grateful. Yeah.
So growing up, I mean, coming from a very old farmhouse that was actually shingled with asbestos tiles and then eventually aluminum sided over that, we had a very damp basement. The driveway actually came from the street and sloped down toward the house. It was an under the house garage. So it was always wet, always damp, always a little bit of mold. Back then, black mold was like not a big deal. Like we didn't think about it. And radon was something new, like in the 80s, like radon, what's that?
Mhm.
So Rick, Paulina, tell us how in your career, how has the idea and concept of a home inspection really changed based on EPA guidelines or on popular, consensus?
Well, I will tell you that we've had this discussion before, and we have sons who are 22 and 18. And when we were that age, when I was 18, there really were no home inspectors, and there really was no radon. So
I mean, there was, we just didn't know about it yet.
right. So our jobs, or what we do, really didn't exist, at that time, or they were in their infancy, maybe I should say. So it's evolved a lot. I think in the beginning, with home inspections, a lot of people didn't get them. They would have their uncle who was a contractor walk through with them and just take a look at it. But it's gotten more involved than that. It's really gotten down to, we have infrared now. We have tools that we can use. We don't do anything invasive. So, when you're watching HGTV and Mike Holmes starts tearing out walls and ceilings, that's not what we do. But we do have tools that allow us to, gain insight and get clues to maybe things that may be going on underneath the surface.
And the
And so,
industry itself, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Paulina.
I was just going to say the industry itself has really evolved, because when Rick first started out as a home inspector, he became certified, but you didn't need a license to be an inspector. And so how many years was it into?
I started in 1999, and licensing in Illinois kicked in 2003.
So until then, there was just a lot of, people who maybe didn't have any clue what they were doing, but it just sounded interesting and they were out there doing it. So it's really evolved since then. And definitely the industry is evolving every year that we see. It's growing and expanding in the services that we offer. Yeah, we've really seen a huge growth.
And so do you guys typically work for the buyer, or are you typically engaged by the seller in a property deal?
Most of our inspections are for the buyers, but it doesn't have to be that way. We also do pre-inspection, pre-sale inspections, where we're working with the sellers, because the sellers want to know what's going on with my house. I haven't been up in that attic for 50 years since I've lived here.
Right.
And we want to know before. So we can work with the sellers. We can work with, mostly we work with the buyers, but we can also work with just regular homeowners who want to know what's going on in their house. So we have several different types of inspections that we can do for current homeowners, or we call them concerned homeowners.
Okay. And once you identify problems, or I hate to say problems, but once you identify weaknesses or things that can be improved upon, do you have a Rolodex of contractors that you trust that can go in and change the installation, can take off that popcorn ceiling? Or do you pretty much just give the report to the client and say, this is our analysis, but we don't want to get involved. It's up to you to choose the contractor that you feel comfortable working with. Like, how does that work?
Based on my past experience being a general contractor, unfortunately, there are a lot of, people who aren't dependable and don't show up. And, so I do have like a handful of people that I recommend, people that I've known for years who have done work for us personally. I have a roofer, I have an appliance repair person, there are probably a few people, electrician, but really don't like to get too deep into that because you're really basing your reputation on somebody else's actions and what they're going to do or what they're not going to do. And we prefer maybe not to go there. But again, we do have a few people, depending on, what the client is asking for, we may be able to help in some cases.
Sure. No, I understand that. I mean, it is true. I mean, on one hand, you really want to help. You want to help the buyer, the seller, the people that have been in the business and and trust. At the same time, you are also risking some credibility, in your business if they don't show up or if they perform poorly.
Yes.
Sure.
But, again, well, that's really interesting because, here I am asking the two of you to represent yourself to my clients, right? So there's a trust factor and there's a risk also at the same time.
Yes.
But that's really, I think, a risk I'm willing to take because I want to help people, right? And it's really ultimately up to the client to do their due diligence, to vet you and make sure that, you can do everything that you say you can do. All right. So speaking of HGTV, the statement, the theme that never is on 24/7, 365 over here. What are some fallacies? Like when you guys are watching that together, or maybe you've watched it, maybe you don't watch it anymore, but like, what are some of the big misconceptions between being an actual home inspector and watching all these flip shows and all that kind of stuff that's on HGTV?
That all repairs go smoothly and they take 15 minutes.
And they're like a quarter of the price that they really are. Like, okay, we want to put a second addition on the house and a new garage and a new bathroom. And how much is that going to, we're going to budget $60,000 for that. And you're like, where are they living? I mean, where does that happen? I don't know.
Not realistic in some cases.
Not realistic,
yeah,
no.
Sometimes.
Yeah, there's a new show that I'm watching with my wife. It's like they design a room and do everything in like 12 hours. Literally, like they surprise the customer, the homeowner. As soon as they leave for work, they go in, scoop everything up, put it in a moving van. They're doing landscaping, new additions. I mean, amazing work, top to bottom, in 12 hours by the time that the client comes home, which I can't even understand.
I would love
it.
that.
It looks easy, but in reality, I think there's probably more.
And what corners might they be skimping? Because sometimes when you're, you look at something, you see it looks nice, but then you dig in a little bit deeper and it's not so nice.
Right.
And then you're ripping out walls and having to do all the other things. So I'm not sure.
And if I could just say, just to piggyback on that, we get that all the time. So when a prospective client calls and they're scheduling an appointment, one of our questions is, do you have any concerns? And a lot of times they say, no, it's just been rehabbed and everything looks great. And then we go in and, there's 28 things on our summary list because, the surface looks good. But when you start digging and start really looking at things, it's not. So I would encourage anybody, whether you're buying new construction or something that's been recently rehabbed or, a house that's 2 or 3 years old, we do warranty inspections on homes that are, 10 or 11 months old, and we find problems all the time. So in 23 years, I have yet to find the perfect home. It's just not out there. So yeah, absolutely.
So who are your ideal clients? I mean, tell me, like, if you could just dial in and have your perfect client for the next number of years, what would that look like for you guys?
We think somebody who's educated and knows the importance of good value. It's not all about price, and I think when you're spending $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000, you're not looking for the cheapest inspector or trying to save $25. So I think it's more about value than price when you're doing that. So that would be, we have people call how much, and we understand that price is always a concern, but we feel it shouldn't be your main concern, and there's other questions that you should be asking, like, how long you've been in business? Can I look at your website? Do you have reviews? Are you licensed? Are you certified? Things like that. So, it's important to, again, you never want to overpay for anything, but I think that price should be almost secondary when you're doing a home inspection.
And what are you seeing now in terms of your inspections? Is it like radar no longer a thing? I mean, now it's mold, or have we gone from mold? Then we went from we went from radon to asbestos to mold. Like, is there a new thing that's coming out there? Like maybe the home is so tight that it's got too much formaldehyde fumes or so. I don't know. I'm just kind of making this up. Like, is there anything new on your radar that you're seeing in the industry or in the home business that's
No, and you
concerned.
kind of touched on it, are VOCs or volatile organic compounds, which are off-gassing from building materials, from furniture, carpet, your dry cleaning, anything that you bring into the house like that may affect your air quality. We do a lot of radon testing. So that's something that we feel is important. It is the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking, and 22,000 people a year die from, radon related lung cancers. So that's important because you can't see it and you can't smell it, and everybody has it. And we just test to make sure that the levels are safe levels. But radon, air quality, the newest thing I think would probably be VOCs, just testing for, general air quality and, kind of what's affecting the air in your house.
Interesting. And so you primarily work in how far are you willing to travel from your home base in Schaumburg?
Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates.
We're in
area.
Schaumburg. We're pretty central, and we go an hour in any direction. So we go as far. We go to Aurora. We go up to Waukegan. We go into the city. So we're in a very central location, so we can get a lot of places in an hour. You could be in Rockford, could be in DeKalb, anything like that. So an hour in any direction from Schaumburg
covers quite a lot of area for us.
Yes.
Do you find that the older industrial areas, like maybe Rockford, Freeport, Belvedere, may contain more radon than, say, Hoffman Estates, Schaumburg, and Prospect Heights? Does the way the neighborhood or the geographic location evolved have anything to do with radon levels, or is it just so natural it's found in every basement or 2 feet under the foundation? Like, how does that work?
So really, it's about the soil that's underneath your house. So you could have really, really, really high levels of radon, but your neighbor could have none. So we do find that there are certain areas that tend to have higher levels of radon, like St. Charles. I mean, we pretty much know that if you're buying a house in St. Charles and it doesn't have a mitigation system in it, that your levels are going to be high. And I have heard a reason why, but I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what the reason is. It's the way that St. Charles was built, like on a ledge or something that causes uranium. So basically what radon is the breaking down of uranium becomes radon, and radon itself is not dangerous, but when radon breaks down, it actually turns from a gas to little particles that are not visible. And those little tiny particles are what float up into your house through cracks in the foundation, through an uncovered sump pump, through construction joists, through your water. And you breathe in the particles, they lodge in your lungs, and that's what causes the lung cancer. So it's really dependent on the soil. So like, for example, in the city, when we test in Chicago, it's very rare that we find high levels of radon, but we have. So then you have to test no matter what, because even though it's not statistically higher in Chicago, there are definitely high levels in some buildings.
So if someone calls you in for a radon test and you find radon, and then you do the radon mitigation, and then you've quote unquote don't find radon anymore, like it's checked, do both instances have to occur like on some kind of public record, or does the seller only have to report that we have radon mitigation? It's like, what's the audit trail if there is one?
So if it's during a real estate transaction, that's when there's a trail, I guess you could say. So you have to, if it's during a real estate transaction, the rules and protocols of testing are very, very specific, because we have such a short time in order to test, so that we have to make the building that we're testing be as I guess the test to be as accurate as possible. So we have to follow very specific protocols.
Okay.
But if you're an owner of a home and you do the test on your own, which you can, you don't have to hire a licensed radon professional. You can go to Home Depot and pick up a little tiny radon tester and test yourself, send it into the state. The state will run the test for you and send it back to you, but now the state will know. So if you have high levels of radon in your home, then you have to disclose that. So if you want to sell your property,
I don't like that.
Right, and you test it now, or you could, buy. Well, you'd have to run it through the state of Illinois, because that's how you're going to find out what the results are.
Okay.
So It's different when you're in a real estate transaction as opposed to when you're just a concerned homeowner and you want to know what's going on in your house. So I've tested homes that had a mitigation system that was put in by the owner, and it was some funky little weird device, but it worked. And it didn't have to follow any of the guidelines that the state of Illinois requires to follow if you're a licensed mitigation contractor. So in the state of Illinois, for us, we are licensed to only do testing. We are not licensed to mitigate. So if we find a house that has high levels of radon, they ask us, can we mitigate? We will normally give them 3 names of contractors that we know are licensed and have seen their systems and know that they're reputable companies.
Okay. Wow. Listen, thanks for joining me on this conversation. This is just as enjoyable now as it is when we met in person in Schaumburg at the We Connect Leaders Networking Group. So Rick and Paulina, how can people get a hold of you if they want to know more about your home inspection services and the radon testing?
Sure. Office number direct is 847-309-3000. Again, 847-309-3000. We do have a website that has all kinds of information about our services.
And radon.
There's a sample report on the website that people can look at. You can schedule 24/7 on the website, and that's Housedoctors, www.housedoctorsinc.com, plural, www.housedoctorsinc.com. So those are the 2 best ways to reach us.
Excellent. Well, it's really a pleasure to see the both of you again. I missed the last 1 or 2 networking events. I do suspect and anticipate going to the one on the 31st. So I hope to see you again in person. And thank you again for joining us. I love what you guys are doing. I love your relationship. I love the way you guys interact with each other, even off the camera. Great business owners and a great couple. So thank you so much for being just a great couple to interview.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Bill. We
appreciate
appreciate the
Yeah.
time and also, you reaching
opportunity.
out to us. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks. We got small businesses, man. We got to stick together, right?
Absolutely. We're there.
We appreciate it.
We
Thank
got
you.
your back.
Okay.